Hello dear viewers and welcome to RTD's English News Edition. Here are our top stories for tonight. President Anglais and Ethiopian Prime Minister meet in 101 meeting in Addis Ababa. In our international news, signature of a contract of the century for 31 billion euros. Thank you for joining us in our newsroom. After the holding of the summit, the head of state, His Excellency Ismail Anglais, had a one-on-one meeting with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed at the main use of the discussion strengthening the bilateral relations between the countries, but also continue to be a model of regional integration for the rest of the African countries. The Republic of Djibouti and the Federal Republic of Ethiopia are two historical linked brother countries. The two leaders gave a broad overview of the current regional and international issues. They also mentioned the bilateral cooperation between the two countries and the economic integration between Djibouti and Ethiopia. Issues of common interest were raised during this meeting. Also, the head of state, His Excellency Ismail Anglais, received his counterpart from the Federal Republic of Somalia, Mr. Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. Discussions focused on fraternal relations between the two countries, the strengthening of the bilateral ties that bind the two countries. Foreign Minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Minister of Finance Ilyas Musadwali, and Djibouti Ambassador to Ethiopia Mohammed Idris Farah took part in this meeting. The two countries share the same linguistic and religious cultural values. They evoked the socio-economic context of the sub-region. The President has this time received a delegation from the World Bank with its Vice President, Mr. Hafiz Ghanem, advocating for inclusive growth and poverty reduction by funding projects to develop human capital, support private sector development, increase agricultural productivity, improve access to infrastructure, build resilience, climate change, and promote regional integration were at the heart of the discussions. And let us forget that Mr. Hafiz Ghanem, Vice President of the World Bank for Africa region, is a development expert with more than 30 years of experience. He is responsible for a regional portfolio of more than 600 projects for a total commitment of $71 billion. Took part in this meeting the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Finance. The head of state, in an interview, the Vice President, Mr. Hafiz Ghanem, mentioned the program that the bank is setting up with the European Union and with the countries of the sub-region. He said in this interview, it is a program for the development of the Horn of Africa, so it's a regional integration program. With the head of state, they discussed on how to strengthen economic integration among the countries of the sub-region, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, and Kenya. Also in the bilateral meetings, the President of the Republic, His Excellency Ismail Anglais, has received a delegation from the Exim Bank headed by its regional director, Mr. Benedicto Orama. Discussions focus on ways to strengthen regional infrastructure to facilitate trade, including import and export in the region. The head of diplomacy, Mr. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, and the Minister of Finance, Ilyas Musadwali, took part in this meeting. In an interview, the representative of Exim Bank explained the purpose of the discussions. This is what he said.
The Export-Import Bank and the government of Djibouti, especially the projects we are currently finalizing, totaling about $300 million, covering transportation, the supply of vehicles, trucks and taxis for Djibouti, and also supporting the airline. We are also finalizing discussions regarding the financing of jetty and the construction of tank farms. So we thanked the President for the opportunity to support Djibouti in those transactions.
Also, the head of state takes part in the Smart Africa meeting. President of the Republic, His Excellency Ismail Omar Guelleh, on the silence of this 32nd summit of heads of states, took part in the 70th meeting of the Board of Directors of Smart Africa in the Sheraton Hotel. This bold and innovative ministerial meeting of African heads of state and government aims to accelerate the sustainable socio-economic development of the continent by introducing Africa in the knowledge of the secret use of information and communication technologies. This meeting, chaired by Rwandan President Paul Kagame, was attended by the head of state, His Excellency Ismail Omar Guelleh, the President of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, Mr. Guinea and Mr. Konakiri, Mr. Alpha Conde, the Director of the African Development Bank, various delegations of the telephone operators. The Minister of Communication, Mr. Abdi Yusuf Suge, also took part in this meeting in the transformed Africa framework thanks to digital. Communication Minister Abdi Yusuf Suge emphasized in an interview the importance that the Republic of Djibouti will play in the digital transformation. The Minister of National Education and Vocational Training, Mr. Mustafa Mohamed Mahmoud, received today the Minister of Gender and Family Promotion of Rwanda, Mrs. Soline Nirabimana. The meeting was attended by the Minister of Women and the Family, Ms. Moumina Hamad Hassan, and the Secretary General of MENFOP, Mr. Mohamed Abdullah Mahyoub. The Minister of Women and the Family first recalled the context of this official visit by her Rwandan counterpart. She stressed the ambition to share with the MENFOP the Rwandan experience in early childhood and preschool education. The opportunity for her to welcome the Rwandan minister in the field through including early learning centers where toddlers are welcomed before their schooling in basic education. Mrs. Nira Habimana gave a lengthy presentation of her country's experience and expressed her wish to engage in fruitful cooperation with the MENFOP and the Ministry of Women and Family. An ambition greeted enthusiastically by the Minister of National Education and Vocational Training, Mustafa Mohamed Mahmoud, who took the opportunity to present the policy of his department and in particular the progress made since the General State of Education of December 1999. Above all, it focuses on the transformative project of which preschool is an essential pillar in order to improve the quality and inclusion of the education system. The MENFOP and its discussion with visitors have finally made mutual commitments to pull the skills and know-how of each to make the most of it. The Minister of Women and the Family, Mrs. Moumina Hamad Hassan, held a meeting with her Rwandan counterpart. This meeting consisted of the exchange of experience from two countries, particularly in the field of the promotion of women. Has seen the participation of Director of Gender Observatory, Mrs. Shukri Hussein, and her Rwandan counterpart, Rose Rabulihi. Then the leaders proceeded to the signing of a partnership agreement of two countries in the field of women, family, and children. On the Djiboutian side, the Gender Observatory Director signed this partnership agreement with her counterpart, as well as the Djiboutian Rwandan women ministers signed this partnership agreement as well. After the signing of the partnership agreement, the two directors expressed to the press the importance of this signature.
Convention de partenariat avec l'Observatoire Genre de Rwanda.
In addition, the Rwandan Ministry of Women and Family mentioned that this partnership aims to further strengthen the links between the two countries in the field of gender promotion. As for the Djiboutian Minister of Women, Mrs. Moumina Hamad Hassan has, for her side, stressed that this signature follows the friendship between the two countries. The Rwandan Minister of Women, Mrs. Solin, on a two-day working visit, visited yesterday morning the headquarters of the National Union of Djiboutian Women, UNFD. She was accompanied by the Minister of Women, Moumina Hamad, and she was received at the headquarters by the Vice President of the UNFD, Mrs. Hasna Hamad Bilil, and the Secretary General, Mrs. Fatuma Musa, in the presence of women MPs. The delegation visited the various workshops for the training. She went successively to the steering room, to the listening cell, and finally to a training center and learning room where classes are dispensed. After the visit, the two ministers had a meeting with the participation of the officials of the UNFD, whose Vice President, Ms. Hasna Hamad, in the presence of the women parliamentarians. Mrs. Anura Habibmana shared during the meeting the experience of her country in favor of women. And from the Djiboutian side, the Djiboutian women shared their experience to promote the status of women under the leadership of the First Lady, Mrs. Khadra Mohamed Haid, also President of the UNFD. The expand discussions for all participants focused on the exchange of experience on the government agenda for women between the two sides and the ways and means to further enhance bilateral relations focused on the advancement of women. Also in the national news, the Minister of Commerce, Mr. Hassan Hamad Ibrahim, presided this morning the inauguration ceremony of a hardware store named Brico Discount. The ceremony brought together many public and private Djiboutian officials. Upon his arrival, the ministerial delegation was greeted by the manager, Mr. Nur Omar Abdallah. Implanted on more than 1,000 square meters in Djibouti, Brico Discount strive to become the new reference in matters of tools, gardening, and the like. The shop offers customers all products for indoor and outdoor work ranging from materials, tools, and electricity. The manager, Nur Omar, aims to satisfy all the demands, the modernization, decoration of the inside and outside as well. In a brief intervention, Mr. Nur Omar thanked the Minister Delegate for Trade for proceeding with the inauguration. The presence of the Minister of Commerce, the commitment of the government of Djibouti to the concretization of private initiatives, Brico Discount, he said, will allow customers to do their shopping for the construction or the development of their house, individually or with their families. The inauguration ceremony was chaired by the Minister of Commerce, Mr. Hassan Ahmed Ibrahim, and he congratulated the manager of Brico Discount, Mr. Nur Omar, for this private initiative that incorporates the development of policy of private sector of the President of the Republic. Many Djiboutians, he said, will benefit from job opportunities in this new store that offers exceptional and offers for consumers for all types of work. And after the inauguration of the store, Brico Discount, located in the Salin West, here is the reaction of a participant. Moving on with the national news, the Secretary of State for Youth and Sports, Hassan Mohamed Kamil, accompanied by his close associates, visited the Italian military base where he was received by Colonel Liborio Balambella, a base commander. After a brief discussion, Colonel Balambella made a presentation to his distinguished guests with an image of the background to the construction of the base, which houses a large omnisport equipped with ecological air conditioner, the missions of the army, as well as the activities carried out as part of their support and cooperation in the field and military field, including two flagship projects, that of the construction of the village school of Buya and Basic Green Project, which aims to make this space a model. The delegation then went to the sport hall so that the Secretary of State could inaugurate it. The base commander undertook a guided tour of the room to his guests, who had the opportunity to discover the expertise of the Italian army. In his intervention, the colonel thanked his host for this visit, since he was the first government official, he said, to walk down the ground at the base. In addition, he was very honored that the Secretary of State inaugurated their Omnisport Hall. He ended his remarks by expressing satisfaction at the cooperation that unites the two institutions. The Secretary of State, for his part, thanked the Army in general and the Colonel in particular for all the efforts made in the promotion and development of the Djiboutian youth, for which he is the first responsible, and that in accordance with the will of the head of state. He had took all of the ways and means to satisfy the needs of the youth. He hoped that this cooperation will see a new turning point and improve further in the best interests of the youth. Early this morning of Monday, February 11, Lieutenant General Zakaria Shah Ibrahim, Chief of the General Staff of the Army Forces, flew aboard the MiG-35 helicopter on the current firing range located near Mariama. In his trip, General Zakaria Shah Ibrahim was accompanied by Brigadier General Tahir Ali Mohammed, Chief of Defense Staff Colonel Mohammed Elmi, Head of the Operation Division. Indeed, a detachment of the armed regime of the Camp Sheikh Osman maneuvered for a week in this zone for an exercise of synthesis. On the descent of this helicopter, General Zakaria Shah Ibrahim was greeted by Captain Abdul Qadir Douale El-Tire, Deputy Officer. Then General Zakaria Shah Ibrahim greeted female personnel of the army commanded by the Commander Amina Muhammad Musa. Then it is the turn of Colonel Dahir Hassan Abadid, Chief of the Armed Regime, to expose and present to General Zakaria Shah Ibrahim the progress of the exercise and the rolling means involved for this maneuver. Thus, the general was able to hear from Colonel Abadid about the articulations of the different combat groups. Thus, it is not less than 10 vehicles, including light vehicles and tanks mounted by different weapons, who started shooting at well-defined targets at a distance of 500 meters. On the orders of the Armored Regime Corps Commander, the armored vehicles began to deploy to occupy the enemy zone. The inspection visit is part of the training and operational preparation of the military to obtain a professional and well-trained army. Moving on to the international news, France and Australia signed Monday their strategic partnership, which involves the construction of 12 submarines for the Australian Navy. Total amount of the agreement more than 31 billion euros. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison held a very ambitious plan at a ceremony in Canberra in the presence of French Armed Forces Minister Florence Parly. The French company Naval Group will be responsible for supervising the construction of the submarines. The assembly will take place in the Australian city of Adelaide for a first delivery scheduled in 2030. The deal will create about 2,800 jobs in Australia, according to South Australian Prime Minister Stephen Marshall, and occupy 500 people in France. For several years, the waters of the northern and eastern Australia have been the scene of a bitter battle of influence between the United States, China, and the regional powers. Australian military experts hope that these submarines will allow Australia to offer a credible deterrent to hostile action. That's all for this news. Thank you for your attention. Have a good night.